Good day everyone. So for today's video, we're going to discuss how to test hypothesis about our population mean. So on our previous modules, we have discussed confidence interval, T distribution, C distribution, and now we are now going to apply it as we test a statement or a claim about our population mean. So, as we test our hypothesis, of course, kailangan nating sundin ang iba't ibang procedures or steps para makapag-come up tayo with an accurate decision. Okay? And here comes the following steps in hypothesis testing. Okay? Hypothesis testing is somewhat like a problem solving. O parang nagsosolve tayo ng problem. But tulad din ng sinabi natin, kapag nagtetest tayo ng hypothesis, is that we are what do you call that? We are proving that a certain value from our sample is true as with regards to our population. Okay? So the first step for us in testing our hypothesis is number one is we have to state the given. Alright, in stating our given, ang pinaka-importante lang po na makita natin sa ating problem is the standard deviation, either the sample standard deviation or pwede din namang variance yung nakalagay sa ating problem kasi makukuha naman yung standard deviation gamit yung variance. Okay? Either po kung sample man yan or population standard dev or variance. And next is our population mean. Importante din po ito dahil ito po ay gagamitin natin on our next step. Okay? Since this discussion is all about testing hypothesis about the population mean. Kaya importante po yung population mean. Okay? So yung dalawa yung pinaka-importante nating given. And of course, importante din yung sample size natin. Kasi kailangan din natin siya sa computation. Alright? And next is that we have to formulate our hypothesis. Okay, ano ba yung hypothesis? Or hypothesis in singular form. Hypothesis is a claim about our population. Okay, kumbaga para siyang statement. Diba? On your junior high school, you commonly define hypothesis as an educational guess. But here, hypothesis is a claim. Ito yung gusto nating patunayan dun sa problem. Okay, and we have two kinds of hypothesis. We have the null hypothesis, represented by HO, and our alternative hypothesis, are represented by H1. When we say null hypothesis, ito yung tinatawag natin na status quo, or parang walang nangyayari. No changes at all. So, ibig sabihin, if we're going to symbolize our hypothesis, makikita po natin doon yung equality. Okay? But there are instances na merong kapag symbolize natin yung hypothesis natin, merong less than or equal to, tsaka greater than or equal to. It is still considered to be a null hypothesis kasi nandun pa rin yung ating equality symbol. And alternative, when we say alternative, this is just the counterpart of our null hypothesis. If our null hypothesis ay nagko-concern or may concern sa equality, then our alternative hypothesis should be not equal to. Okay? But if our null hypothesis, let's say for example, deals with the statement na sinabi ay at least. Kapag sinabing at least is greater than or equal to. So if it's greater than or equal to, then our alternative hypothesis is its complement. So that would be what? That would be less than. But kapag ang null hypothesis naman natin is at most, ibig sabihin less than or equal to. Yung kanyang counterpart or yung kanyang complement would be our alternative hypothesis, which is greater than. Alright, so that's how we formulate our alternative and null hypothesis. Okay? Pero not in all cases ay laging complement yung binibigay. There are cases na ang null mo deals with equality, pero yung alternative mo deals with, let's say for example, greater than. Okay? So, depende po yun sa problem. Kung in-state niya po doon yung population mean and the sample mean. So, ipagpo-compare mo pa po yun. Alright? So, that's how we formulate our hypothesis. So, it depends upon the given. But if kung walang population mean and sample mean sa problem, wala tayong problema. Yung complement lang nun, yung magiging magka-partner dun sa dalawa nating hypothesis. Okay? Next is for us to test, to determine our test procedure. There are two test procedures in hypothesis testing. We have the what we so-called z-test, and we have the what we so-called t-test. Alright? So, medyo familiar na kayo dito kasi na-catch up na natin siya on the previous modules. So, just like what we did on the computation of the confidence interval, if you still remember the confidence interval, I hope you do. Sana natatandaan po. Kasi ito si confidence interval is actually a part of hypothesis testing. Okay? But later na natin siya pag-uusapan. So, si z-test, ginagamit natin si z-test if our population variance is known, or kapag alam natin yung population variance. Kung hindi man population variance ang given, pwede din naman yung population standard deviation. Kapag yung population standard deviation natin ay given, z-test po ang gagamitin natin. Okay? And in dealing with the test procedure, kapag z-test ang gagamitin natin, so gagawa ngayon tayo ng test statistic, or kukumpitin natin yung test statistic. Sa pagkuha ng test statistic ni z-test, we have z sub c, ibig sabihin yan yung computed z value, is equal to what? Is equal to our sample mean, okay? Our sample mean minus what? Minus our population mean over our population standard deviation multiplied by the square root of our sample size. So, tulad na sinabi ko, it is very important, yung mga given natin. Population mean, sample mean, standard deviation, at saka si sample size. So, yung pong apat na yun. So, kapag z-test ang gagamitin, ito lang po yung ating gagamitin na test statistic. Pero, kailan natin ginagamit yung t-test? So, si t-test, so, kabaliktaran naman ni z-test. Ginagamit natin ang t-test if the population variance or the population standard deviation is unknown, or hindi natin alam yung population variance or population standard deviation. So, unknown po ito. So, paano naman po natin kukunin yung test statistics ng ating t-test? So, si t-test, we have t sub c, ibig sabihin the computed t is equal to, of course, our, again, sample mean minus our population mean over our sample standard deviation na ngayon ang gagamitin natin, multiplied by the square root of our sample size, or the square root of n. Alright, so almost the same lang siya. Almost the same lang ZZ at saka CT. Ang pinagkaiba lang, ZZ ginagamit po natin ang population standard dev, pero kay t-test, ginagamit po natin ang sample standard deviation. Okay? So that's how we determine our test procedure. It may be a t-test or a z-test. But pwede iano pa rin po natin if it's one-tailed or two-tailed. So paano naman po natin ma-determine if one-tailed or two-tailed po ang ating t-test or z-test? So yung one-tailed or two-tailed is nag-rely siya kung ano yung ating alternative hypothesis. So, ano po ba yung alternative hypothesis po natin? If our alternative hypothesis deals with inequality or not equal to, ibig sabihin, two-tailed test po ang gagamitin natin. Okay? two-tailed kasi walang specific direction. Wala pong specific direction. Now, kapag ang ating alternative hypothesis naman is greater than or kaya naman less than, then ang gagamitin po natin ay one-tailed. Okay? Ibig sabihin, meron siyang certain direction. It's either sa taas or sa baba. Okay? So, pwede pong mangyari that our test procedure is a two-tailed z-test or a one-tailed z-test, or pwede din namang two-tailed t-test or one-tailed t-test. So, it depends upon the problem. Okay? And next is that we have to create our decision rule. So, how do we create our decision rule? Our decision rule is being created depending upon our alpha level or yung tinatawag nating level of significance. Okay? So, si level of significance, depende yan kung 1%, 5%, or 10%. Okay? So, ito lang yung tatlong commonly used. Sa science, sa mga experimental researches, kalimitang ginagamit ay 1% para mas accurate. Pero let's say for example, you are doing educational research or educational study of mga social sciences, we are dealing with 5% level of significance. Okay? Or either 10%. But I would assure you that these three level of significance are the most commonly used level of significance when it comes to researches. Okay? So, si decision rule, dito po papasok yung tinatawag nating critical region. So, yung critical region po natin, depende po yan sa ating level of significance. So, si critical region ay magiging, let's say for example, this is our normal distribution and our alpha level is 5%. Okay? So, depende pa rin po yung decision rule natin sa kung ano yung test procedure natin. Let's say for example, we have a two-tailed C-test. Okay? A two-tailed, ito yung test procedure natin, two-tailed Z-test. Ibig sabihin, yung 5% mo is madidivide into 2. So, magiging alpha over 2. Bakit? Bakit magiging alpha over 2? Kasi nga, two-tailed yung Z-test natin. So, that is 2.5% or 0.025. That is 0.025. Okay? So, ito po yung magiging alpha level natin. At ito po yung titignan natin sa ating table. Either the T-table or the Z-table. Depending upon, again, our test procedure. Okay? So, yung critical region dyan is dito yung unang 2.5% at yung pangalawang 2.5% ay dito naman sa kabila. Kasi nga, two-tailed. Okay? Ibig sabihin, sir, ano po yung blanco dito? Ano po yung blanco dito? Ito po yung kinompute natin on our previous module. That is our confidence interval. Okay? Yan yung confidence interval or somehow, tinatawag natin siyang critical values. Ito yung critical values na tinatawag natin. Okay? Kung saan, within that range, doon magfo-fall yung true value ng ating population mean. Okay? And, ano naman po yung critical region? Yung critical region, ito naman po yun. Yung 2.5% at 2.5% sa kanan at sa kaliwa. And that is what we so-called the rejection area. Alright, that is what we so-called the rejection area. If our test statistics falls on this rejection area, ibig sabihin, ire-reject natin yung null hypothesis. Remember na ang nire-reject po natin ay laging null hypothesis. Okay? So what will be our decision rule? So we have three types of decision rule depende sa kung ano yung procedure natin. If one-tailed tayo, okay, kapag one-tailed tayo, ang magiging decision rule natin is either yung T sub C is greater than positive. So, ibig sabihin, positive dapat yung ating tabular value na T sub alpha, df. Okay? So, kapag one-tailed tayo, i-reject natin, we reject HO, one-tailed kapag KZ. Kapag positive yung positive yung T computed, ibig sabihin dapat greater siya dun sa positive t-value or t-tabular. Okay, pero kung negative naman yung z natin, ibig sabihin kailangan less than siya. Less than this one. Okay, so ito mahanap natin to sa table natin. Okay, so i-reject natin yung HO kapag ganito. Paano naman po kapag two-tailed na t? Kapag two-tailed na t naman po, we have the absolute value. Kasi yung absolute value, either way lang naman siya. Okay, either way lang naman siya. So, ibig sabihin, if our test statistics is greater than or equal to, kasi absolute value na ito with that of our tabular t-value. Okay? So, ito po kapag t-test. Paano naman po kapag z-test? May nakalimutan tayo dito sa ating kapag two-tailed is alpha over 2 po ito. Okay, kasi nga two-tailed. Alright, so lagyan natin this is two-tailed. Okay. Next is that we have, paano naman kapag kay z? So same lang po kapag kay z. Kapag kay z naman, our z computed is greater than our z alpha. Okay, kasi wala naman tayong degrees of freedom kay z. Paano naman po kapag negative yung z computed natin, it should be less than z alpha. Okay? We reject HO kapag na-supply natin itong mga either of these conditions. Paano naman po kapag two-tailed? Kapag two-tailed naman, again, that is the absolute value of the z computed. It should be what? Greater than or equal to what? Z alpha over 2. Okay? Kasi kaya alpha over 2 kasi nga that is what? That is two-tailed. Okay? So that's how we create our decision rule. And next is that, of course, we now compute our test statistic. And then, we have to decide. So, yung pagdedesisyon po natin, depende po sa kung ano ang ating tabular value at sa kung ano ang ating test statistic. And para mas maging concrete yung mga steps na to in testing our hypothesis, let us have problems to solve. Okay? So, by the way, this is the Z table that we are using before. And tulad ng sinabi ko, we have here the most commonly used. Ito nga, 5%, 1%, tapos 0.1%. Okay? So, ito kapag kay Z po ito. Pero, I would encourage you to use this table kasi this table includes t values, t tabular, and so with the z tabular. You say, for example, 5% level of 5% significance level ka. So ito ka, 'di ba? So kapag 5% level of significance ka or significance level, your z value would be 1.645. So doon ka sa dulo titingin. Just like here, 'di ba? Kapag 5%, pag one tail, that is positive or negative 1.645. Okay, pero kapag two-tailed naman na z na, let's say for example, 5%, ito yan, two-tailed na 5%, dito ka titingin, so your z value would be what? That is 1.96, which is, ito din dito. Okay? So, much better na, ito na po yung gamitin natin kasi magkasama na po sila. Okay, so let us try to solve a problem. The problem is all about this one. A nutritionist claims that the yearly consumption of soft drinks per high school student is at least 197 liters. In a sample of 50 randomly selected high school students in a certain municipality, the mean of the yearly consumption was 213 liters with standard deviation of 13 liters. Is there evidence to support the claim at 10% significance level? Alright. So, our first thing to do is for us to state our given. Ano-ano ba yung mga given? Sabi dyan, a nutritionist claims. So, this talks something about our hypothesis. A nutritionist claims that the yearly consumption of soft drinks per high school student is at least 197 liters. So, 197 liters is what? Is our population mean. So, this represents mu. Okay, the population mean. Now, in a sample of 50 randomly selected students. So, sino po si 50? 50 is our, what? 50 is our sample size. Okay? So, ito po yung step 1 natin. We state our given. Next is that, sabi dyan, among the 50 randomly selected high school students, the mean of the yearly consumption was 213 liters. So, ibig sabihin, gamit yung 50 randomly selected, that is our sample. So, our sample mean, represented by X bar, was 213 now. That is 213. Okay? Next, the mean of the yearly consumption was 213 liters with standard deviation of 13 liters. So, sino po si standard deviation natin dito? Yung standard deviation natin dyan, is it population or sample? So, sabi dito sa statement, from 50 randomly selected. So, ibig sabihin, yung 13 liters na standard dev is our sample standard deviation. So, that represents our S. Okay, so that is our S, or the sample standard deviation. And then, the question here is there evidence to support the claim at 10% significance level? Yung claim natin dito is our first statement. And that talks about our second step. Okay, our second step is for us to formulate our hypothesis. Okay, sabi dyan, a nutritionist claims that the yearly consumption of soft drinks per high school student is at least 197 liters. So, kapag sinabi natin at least, that talks about what? Our null hypothesis, which tells us that the population mean is greater than or equal to 197. So, this is our HO. Okay? That is our HO. Okay, next is that we have our alternative hypothesis. So, our alternative hypothesis is, of course, its complement. That is mu is less than 197. Remember that 197 is our population. Okay, so that's how we formulate our hypothesis. Okay? Meron pa pong given ata yung nakalimutan. That is actually our alpha level or the significance level, which is 10% or 0.1 or 0.10. Okay? So, after formulating our hypothesis, our next step is for us to determine our test procedure. So, ano po yung magiging test procedure natin? Take a look at our given. Ang given natin is sample standard deviation. So, ibig sabihin, kung sample standard deviation, hindi po natin pwedeng gamitin yung z-test. Okay? Hindi po natin pwedeng gamitin yung z-test. Bakit? Hindi po natin siya gagamitin kasi dapat population standard dev ang given. In our case, sample po yung given. So, ibig sabihin, ang gagamitin natin is t-test. Alright? So, t-test po ang gagamitin natin. And ang mangyayari po, one-tailed or two-tailed t-test. One-tailed po ba or two-tailed na t-test? Sabi dyan, let us rely on our alternative hypothesis. Our alternative hypothesis is what? Less than 197. So, it is somewhat directional. So, ibig sabihin, that would be a one-tailed t-test. Okay po? So, one-tailed t-test. Alright, so after determining our test procedure, we now what? We now make our decision rule. So, our decision rule would be what? Our decision rule would again rely on our hypothesis, of course. Alright, so since this is one-tailed, so our decision rule is that we reject HO, HO if, so saan po tayo magre-rely? So magre-rely pa rin po tayo sa ating alternative hypothesis, to which our alternative hypothesis states that mu is less than 197. So if it's less than, then we are looking for the direction is towards the negative value. Hence, our decision rule should be what? Negative, that's what? That's T computed is what? Is less than our our negative P of alpha, comma, df. Okay? So bakit ganito po yung ating decision rule? Kasi nga yung alternative natin is towards the negative values. Okay? So ngayon kukunin natin yung value ni P P of alpha. Ano ba yung alpha natin? So ang ating alpha is 10%, so that is negative P of 0.10, and our degrees of freedom would be what? That's 50 minus 1, that is 49. So by looking at our table, so nasan ba si 10%? So ito, that's one-tailed. And then we are looking for the degrees of freedom 49. So saan ba malapit si 49 kay 45 kay 60? So mas malapit po siya kay 40, hence we are to consider 1.303. Alright, so our tabular value is 1.303 or negative 1.030. Ayan. Alright, so now we will now have our decision rule that we reject HO if our T computed is what? Is less than negative 1.303. Okay? And after that, if mag-fail man po, then or if hindi man po maging totoo ito at the last part of our decision making, then we fail to reject HO. Okay? So let us now compute for our test statistics. That is our step number 5. So computing our test statistic, we have T sub C is equal to our sample mean minus our population mean over what? Over our sample standard def multiplied by the square root of n. Okay? So we will now have the sample mean according to the problem, that is 213 minus 197 over sample standard def, that's 13 multiplied by the square root of 50. Okay, doing the math, we have 16 over 13 multiplied by the square root of 50. Okay, so diretso na po natin. Our test statistic would be, this is equivalent to 8.7029. Alright, so this will be our test statistics. Okay, now, let us proceed with our last step. That is for us to make a decision. Okay? So, since yung ating T sub or ating test statistics is equal to 8.7029 at yung ating decision rule kanina is that if test statistics is less than negative 1.303. Okay? So, plugging in, we have 8.7029 is it less than negative 1.303? Less than ba yung 8.7 kaysa kay negative 1.03? Is this correct? Alright. So, this is what? This is a false statement. So, false po yung statement natin. Ibig sabihin, hindi po natin pwedeng i-reject yung HO natin. So, our decision is for us to accept our null hypothesis. Alright? Our null hypothesis. Hence, we say that the claim, alright, we say that there is enough evidence to support the claim that the consumption of soft drinks per high school student is at least 197 liters at 10% significance level. Alright, so that's how we test our hypothesis. So let us have now another example. Suppose we have a manufacturer of ethyl alcohol has developed a new packaging design. He claims, alright, so we have here the word claim. So ibig sabihin, this states our hypothesis. He claims that the new packaging design has an average reduction of production expenses of 6 pesos per bottle with a standard deviation of 1 peso and 50 centavos. A manager of one of their satellite production branch claims that, so valid dalawa, claims that the 250 samples of this new packaging design have an average reduction of production expenses of 3 pesos. Test the difference between the population and sample means at 0.05 level of significance. Alright, so our first step would be for us to state our given. Alright, so sabi dito, he claims that the new packaging has an average reduction of production expenses of 6 pesos per bottle with a standard deviation of 1.50. Alright, so this talks about, so dahil wala namang nasabi dito that is what? That is from a sample. So we are assuming that this talks about our population, or this talks about our parameter, or these are the parameters. Alright, hence, our population mean would be what? That would be 6 pesos, and our population standard deviation would be 1.50 or 1.5. Alright? But then again, sabi dito, a manager of one of their satellite production branch claims that the 250 samples, so ibig sabihin our sample size is 250, and then of this new packaging design have an average reduction of production expenses of 3 pesos. So ibig sabihin, that is our sample mean. Alright, so our sample mean is 3 pesos. Alright, so we are not to test the difference between the population and sample means at 0.05 level of significance. So our alpha level is 0.05. Okay? So that will be our given. Those are our given. So let us now formulate our hypothesis. So our null hypothesis, again, now our null hypothesis is a statement about our population to where this concerns equality, of course. So our population mean is sabi dyan is equal to 6 pesos. Alright, so that will be our null hypothesis. Now, our alternative value hypothesis, since sa alternative hypothesis po natin is, ang sabi dyan, kung mapapansin nyo, our population mean is 6 pesos and our sample mean is 3 pesos, which is yung ating sample mean ay mas mababa kaysa kay population mean. Alright, hence, we are to consider our alternative hypothesis as mu is less than 6 pesos. Alright, so dito na po nagkaroon ng deviation from our discussion a while ago. So our alternative hypothesis should be mu is less than 6 pesos. Kasi nga, yung sample natin dito is 3 pesos lang. Okay? Next is that after formulating our hypothesis is that we now determine our test procedure. Ano ba yung test procedure natin? Punta ulit tayo sa given. Ano po ba yung given natin? Ang given natin is population standard deviation. Hence, ang gagamitin po natin dito is what? Ang gagamitin po natin dito is our z-test. Alright, so z-test po ang gagamitin. So ano po ba? One-tailed or two-tailed? So depende po kay alternative. Since our alternative is directional, so our test procedure should be a one-tailed z-test. Okay, one-tailed z-test po. Alright, so let us now proceed with our next step, and that is for us to determine or for us to make a decision rule. Alright? So in creating our decision rule, we reject HO if. So Z po yung atin has Z. So we reject HO if, since our alternative hypothesis talks about less than our population, or less than our parameter, which is 6. Hence our decision rule should be what? Our Z computed should be less than what? It should be less than the negative of our Z alpha. Okay? Our Z alpha. And our Z alpha, so ano ba yung alpha level natin? That is 0.05. Alright. And looking out at our table, so punta po tayo sa table, ating alpha is 0.05 and that talks about Z. So Z po tayo, that is 1.645. Alright, so 1.645, positive or negative? Since dito ay negative kasi nga less than, so that should be what? our Z is negative 1.645. Okay? Kasi 1 tail lang po. Alright, so our decision rule is Z should be what? Should be less than negative what? Negative 1.645. And if we're going to make our normal distribution, ito yung normal distribution natin. This is our mu. And this is, let's say for example, this is negative 1.645. Our rejection area should be here. Alright, so i-reject lang natin yung null hypothesis kapag 645, sorry. Kapag ang ating test statistics ay pumasok po dito or mas less than a negative 1.645. Okay po? Alright. So let us now proceed with our next step, and that is for us to, that is our step number 5, for us to compute for our test statistic. Our test statistic is Z computed is equal to our sample size minus a sample mean minus the population mean over the standard deviation, population standard dev, multiplied by the square root of n. Alright, so we have what? Sample mean, that's 3 minus 6 over what is our population standard dev, that's 1.5, multiplied by the square root of what? The square root of 250. Alright, so that is negative 3 over 1.5 multiplied by the square root of 250. Okay, by doing the math, we have negative 2 multiplied by the square root of 250. So negative 2 multiplied by the square root of 250, that would be negative what? Negative 31.62. So this would be our test statistic. Negative 31.62. Okay? So if this is our test statistic, we may now proceed with our what? With our decision. Alright, and that is our step number 6. So if you still remember, our decision rule is for us to reject HO if yung test statistic natin is lesser than negative 1.645. Okay? So sulat lang natin that Z is less than negative 1.645. Our test statistics is again negative 31.62. So hindi pa natin alam if it's really less than negative 1.645. Alright? So by comparing the value, is negative 31 lesser than negative 1.645? Alright, so by looking at it, that is, the statement is true. Okay? The statement is true. Hence, kung true ito, we what? We reject our HO. We reject our HO. Okay? So, as we reject our HO, we are claiming, or there is enough evidence na yung average reduction of production expenses is 3 pesos. Okay? So merong enough evidence na mas mababa kaysa sa 6 pesos yung ating reduction of production expenses. Okay? And that's how we test our hypothesis.